That evening, Washington, D.C. was cloaked in a cool mist, the air thick with the scent of rain that had just subsided. Inside a stately building exuding timeless elegance and authority, a soft golden glow from crystal chandeliers bathed a long dining table draped in pristine white cloth. Oil paintings adorned the walls, their stories of past generations evoking a sense of solemnity and history. In this regal setting, two pivotal figures were preparing for an encounter laden with significance. Bill Gates, the visionary founder of Microsoft, entered the room with a composed yet confident demeanor. His eyes, sharp and discerning, carried the wisdom of a man who had weathered life's highs and lows. Yet there was a glimmer of curiosity and anticipation about the man he was about to meet. At the other end of the room sat Donald Trump, then President of the United States, a polarizing yet undeniably commanding figure. Dressed impeccably in a tailored black suit, he held a glass of deep red wine, his piercing gaze fixed on the doorway where Bill Gates had just appeared. Bill Gates had grown up in a middle-class family in Seattle, his brilliance and passion for technology evident from a young age. That passion had propelled him to unimaginable heights, transforming him into one of the wealthiest individuals on the planet. Yet wealth was never the sole measure of his life's success. Stepping away from the helm of Microsoft, he devoted his time and resources to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, channeling his energy into improving global health, education, and poverty alleviation for millions around the world. In stark contrast, Donald Trump was born into affluence in New York City, raised amidst the bright lights of high society and the gritty world of business negotiations. From a young age, he mastered the art of making deals, building a real estate empire that bore his name in towering letters. A relentless businessman turned politician, Trump was a symbol of power and determination, a man unafraid of controversy, willing to fight for his goals no matter the cost or criticism. Two men, two stories, two distinct worlds, yet both stood at the pinnacle of their respective domains, where even the smallest decisions had the power to shape the lives of millions. As Bill Gates stepped into the room, he felt an immediate sense of gravity, a solemnity in the air laced with an undercurrent of tension. This wasn't his first meeting with Donald Trump, but tonight carried a weight of its own. Gone were the public stages and shared appearances. This was an intimate, private setting where all pretenses would be stripped away. Bill, with his signature calm demeanor, extended his hand in greeting. The handshake was measured, not overly firm, yet far from indifferent. In Bill's gaze, Trump caught a flicker of sincerity, tempered by cautious reserve. In contrast, Trump exuded his characteristic confidence and authority, as though already steering the evening's narrative. "Welcome, Bill," Trump began, his polished politician's smile firmly in place. "I've been wanting to sit down with you for quite some time. We have so much to discuss." "Thank you, Mr. President," Bill replied, his voice steady and warm. "I've been looking forward to this as well. I hope we can find common ground tonight." Bill's words weren't just polite formalities. He genuinely hoped this exchange would move beyond political discourse. It was an opportunity to understand the person behind the title of President of the United States. Even in those initial moments, their differences stood stark. Trump thrived on theatrics and grand gestures, always eager to command the spotlight. He relished the power of his presence and expected others to follow his lead. Bill, on the other hand, approached interactions with quiet deliberation. He preferred to listen, analyze, and speak only when his words carried weight. The soft flicker of candlelight danced between them as they took their seats at the elegantly set dining table. A waiter presented an array of exquisite appetizers, but neither man seemed to notice the food. Their thoughts were elsewhere, consumed by the implications of this meeting. Bill, both curious and cautious, observed Trump carefully. He knew the president was a force to be reckoned with, but also unpredictable. Was this a genuine chance for collaboration toward a shared goal, or merely a performative encounter? Trump, in turn, found himself intrigued. Sitting across from him was a man he couldn't easily sway. Bill Gates represented intellect and compassion, traits Trump sometimes viewed as distant from his own world. Yet beneath his outward bravado, Trump felt a deep respect for Bill. Despite their disparate backgrounds, both men shared an undeniable ambition: the drive to reshape the world. As the evening unfolded, Bill's gaze occasionally drifted to the window, where city lights shimmered against the glass like scattered stars. His mind seemed to wander to larger concerns, to the global issue that had become his life's mission. Meanwhile, Trump's eyes remained fixed on Bill, sharp and unyielding, as though waiting for the perfect moment to steer the conversation towards something momentous. In this room of history and power, two men, each formidable in his own right, sat at the crossroads of ideologies, ambitions, and hopes. What came next would depend on the words they chose and the courage they found to bridge their worlds. Night had fully descended, and the crystal chandelier above cast a glittering light, its warm glow reflecting off Donald Trump's impeccably tailored suit and Bill Gates's understated yet elegant sweater. The faint scent of scented candles mingled with the cool air from the ventilation system, creating an ambiance that was both formal and inviting. Outside, a gentle drizzle clung to the window panes, amplifying the stillness within. The soft clinking of cutlery on fine porcelain plates blended with the hushed murmurs of servers moving across thick carpets. This wasn't just dinner. It was an encounter between two titans, men who had reshaped the world in their own unique ways. Trump leaned forward slightly, placing his wine glass on the table, his sharp gaze fixed on Bill Gates. Bill, I have to say, it's fantastic that we're finally sitting down like this. I believe there's much we can learn from one another. Bill offered a gentle smile and a nod. Thank you, Mr. President. I agree. This is a rare opportunity for us to discuss matters that go beyond surface-level interests, things we both care deeply about. Trump's smile widened, his voice brimming with confidence. You know, I've always found it fascinating how people compare the way we approach things. I'm a man of action, immediate, decisive, while you seem to analyze every detail before making a move. Bill responded with his characteristic calm. Perhaps our methods reflect our perspectives on the world. You create swift change, while I believe in solutions that stand the test of time. But I think both approaches have their merits. Trump nodded slightly, a glimmer of agreement flickering in his eyes, though the analytical patience of Bill's approach was foreign to him. Each word exchanged felt like a calculated move in a quiet game of psychological chess, each man gauging the other's strategy. Breaking the initial reserve, Trump launched into a story from his early days, when he took over his father's real estate empire. You know, when I started out, people didn't believe I could do anything beyond living in my father's shadow. But I proved them wrong. Bill listened intently, his expression softening in recognition. He remembered his own early struggles, when the idea of a young man building a company that would change the world seemed laughable to many. That feeling is familiar, Bill said warmly. When Paul Allen and I started Microsoft, no one believed software could become the center of everything. They called us dreamers, but it was that dream that brought us here today. Trump leaned forward, intrigued. You know, Bill, I admire people who dream big, but do you ever feel like the price of success is too high? Sometimes it feels like the world forgets who we really are. Bill paused for a moment, his gaze reflective. There are times I've felt that way, but I remind myself that what truly matters isn't how the world perceives us. It's how we contribute to it. The atmosphere grew more contemplative as the conversation shifted to deeper topics. Trump's confident facade softened slightly, and his voice carried a rare vulnerability. Bill, what do you think about leadership? Being president, it's not like running a company. Sometimes the pressure makes me want to walk away. Trump leaned back in his chair, chuckling softly. Inspiration, huh? I usually think leadership is about getting results, no matter what it takes. I don't always have time to wait for inspiration. Bill smiled faintly. Perhaps that's where we differ. But even the fastest approach needs empathy. Without it, we're just machines, not leaders. Trump's demeanor shifted once more, his voice quieter and tinged with introspection. Bill, what do you think is the most important thing in life? Is it money, power, or something else? Bill took a sip of water, his gaze distant as though sifting through memories. When I was young, I thought money was everything. I wanted to prove myself. But as I grew older, I realized the greatest value isn't in what we own. It's in what we leave behind for others. Trump nodded slowly, his voice low, almost as if speaking to himself. Sometimes I wonder if I've left anything truly meaningful. I've built skyscrapers, achieved the successes I dreamed of, but I still feel like I'm searching for something. Bill placed a hand lightly on the table, his tone empathetic. You know, that search is part of the journey. We're never really finished, but it's the search itself that gives life its meaning. The room seemed to hold its breath, each word spoken weaving into the silence like delicate threads. Outside, the soft patter of rain against the window served as a gentle backdrop to the unfolding exchange. A server entered quietly, placing dessert on the table, but neither Donald Trump nor Bill Gates paid any attention. Their focus was entirely on the dialogue, pulling them deeper into thoughts and emotions rarely shared with others. The golden glow of the chandelier above illuminated the sincerity in Bill's calm gaze and the rare pensive expression on Trump's face. What had begun as a simple dinner between two powerful figures had transformed into a moment of vulnerability and unguarded exploration of their innermost truths. By this point, Bill Gates and Donald Trump were no longer merely representatives of their respective domains. They were two men, stripped of their titles, sharing thoughts with an openness neither had expected. The light reflected softly off their glasses, and the faint hum of the room faded as the conversation took on a life of its own. This isn't just a dinner, Trump thought to himself. It's a turning point. The conversation shifted as Trump leaned forward, his fingers tracing the edge of his wine glass. His voice, though firm, carried a note of introspection. Bill, what's your take on success? I've read a lot about you, and it's clear we've taken very different paths to get where we are. For me, success is about seizing opportunities and taking big risks. What about you? Bill smiled gently, his tone steady and deliberate. To me, success isn't a destination, it's a journey. Every step, every decision should carry a long-term purpose. Maybe that's why I tend to move more cautiously, but I've always believed that sometimes slow and steady wins the race. Trump nodded, a flicker of understanding crossing his face, though his instinctive defiance of caution remained. I won't deny that there's value in that, but sometimes I think if you don't act quickly, you miss the opportunity entirely. There have been moments where I've bet everything on a decision made in minutes, and most of the time I've won. Bill chuckled softly, his eyes reflecting both respect and insight. That's the difference in how we view risk. I admire your boldness, but I also believe that some things can't be rushed. Education, health, the environment. These are areas where patience and persistence matter more than speed. Trump leaned his elbows on the table, his gaze curious and probing. You've done a lot for the world, eradicating diseases, fighting poverty, creating opportunities where none existed. I've always wondered, what drives you to devote your life to that? Bill's eyes drifted to the window, where raindrops trailed down the glass like fleeting memories. For a moment, he seemed lost in thought, his voice softer when he finally spoke. I think my greatest motivation comes from the injustices I've witnessed. I've been to places where a full meal is a rare luxury, where children die of diseases that are entirely preventable. When you see that kind of suffering, it's impossible to turn your back if you know you can do something to change it. Trump tilted his head, studying Bill with an intensity that suggested he was hearing these words not just as a political figure or businessman, but as a human being. I can see that, he said slowly. I've built towers and chased dreams, but I've never had to face what you're describing. It's sobering. Bill met Trump's gaze, his voice steady yet compassionate. It's not about guilt or comparison. It's about understanding that each of us has a chance to make a difference in our own way. You've created opportunities too. Jobs, communities, symbols of ambition. Every contribution matters. As the conversation deepened, the differences between them softened. Trump, often brash and assertive, seemed more reflective than usual. Bill, known for his methodical thoughtfulness, exuded an almost paternal warmth. This wasn't just a conversation about success, risk, or philanthropy. It was a dialogue about legacy, about what it means to leave something meaningful behind. The night wore on, but the weight of the conversation lingered. Bill Gates and Donald Trump were no longer just two icons of their time. They were men, vulnerable and human, striving to understand not only the world but themselves. The rain outside continued its soft symphony, as if to underscore the depth of the moment. Neither man knew what the future held, but they had found, however briefly, a common ground, a shared longing to leave a mark that would outlive them. And though the conversation would eventually come to an end, the questions it raised, their reflections on success, leadership, and purpose, would echo long after the night had faded. The hour had grown late, yet the grand room retained its golden warmth, illuminated by the soft glow of chandeliers. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving beads of water glistening on the window panes, catching the faint glow of streetlights. The servers had quietly withdrawn, leaving Bill Gates and Donald Trump in the solitude of their private conversation. The dining table was now bare, save for half-empty wine glasses and a gilded clock softly marking the passing time. After an evening of discussions on success, humanity, and responsibility, the two men turned to the final chapter of their dialogue, a contemplation of legacy, permanence, and the true meaning of life. Trump tilted his chair back slightly, swirling the wine in his glass, his gaze introspective. After a moment, he leaned forward, fixing his eyes on Bill with uncharacteristic seriousness. "Bill, tell me, when all of this is gone, everything we've built, what do you think will be left behind?" The unexpected question made Bill pause. Setting his water glass on the table, he turned his eyes to the window, where rain droplets glimmered like tiny stars. "I think what remains is the impact we've had on the lives of others. Not the buildings, not the wealth, but the values we've instilled and the change we've inspired." Trump let out a faint, almost self-reflective chuckle, shaking his head slightly. "I've built skyscrapers, monuments really, things I thought would stand the test of time, but sometimes I wonder, what do they mean if no one remembers my name?" Bill met Trump's gaze, his voice tinged with empathy. "I understand that feeling, but maybe true permanence doesn't lie in the things we own or the structures we create. It's in the memories we ignite and the opportunities we give to others." The tone of their conversation softened, becoming less guarded and more vulnerable. Trump, usually brisk and assertive, leaned forward, his voice slower and more reflective. "Do you ever have regrets, Bill, about what you've done, or maybe what you haven't done?" Bill took a sip of water, his eyes clouded with thought. "Of course, Mr. President. I regret not spending enough time with my family when I was younger. I was so consumed by building Microsoft, chasing a vision, that I forgot the moments with loved ones don't come back." Trump nodded slowly, his expression showing a flicker of understanding. "I've been there. I spent my life chasing big dreams, building bigger empires. But sometimes, late at night, I wonder, did I miss out? Did I fail to truly know my children or let them know me?" For a moment, the room fell silent. Both men sat with their thoughts, the soft ticking of the golden clock the only sound, a gentle reminder that time, unyielding and impartial, waits for no one. Breaking the silence, Bill spoke, his voice filled with emotion. "I remember meeting a boy in Africa once. His name was Amadou. He had malaria, and his family couldn't afford treatment. But thanks to a project funded by my foundation, he received free care and fully recovered. When I saw him again, his eyes were bright with hope. That moment, it made me realize that even the smallest actions can change a life." Trump was quiet for a while, then spoke in a tone that betrayed his typical bravado. "I remember a family once came to me, about to lose their home because they couldn't pay their mortgage. They begged me for help, and I don't know why, but I just decided to cancel their debt. They couldn't believe it, and for once, money felt like it had real meaning." They exchanged a brief look of understanding, the differences in their methods and paths momentarily fading. Though they came from opposite worlds, they both knew the profound weight of their ability to influence lives. The night grew even quieter, the room wrapped in the glow of dimming lights. Trump swirled the last of his wine, breaking the silence once more. "Do you think we ever truly figure it all out, Bill? Or are we just trying to make sense of it as we go?" Bill smiled faintly, his gaze contemplative. "I don't think anyone has all the answers. Life isn't about solving a puzzle. It's about the act of searching. And maybe, just maybe, it's that search that gives it meaning." Trump leaned back in his chair, exhaling deeply, his expression a mix of thoughtfulness and weariness. Maybe you're right, but it's hard, to know if you're doing it right, if you're making the right mark. Bill nodded. It's never easy, but perhaps the measure of our lives isn't in the certainty of our choices, but in the sincerity of our intentions. As the evening wound to a close, the two men sat in reflective silence, the weight of their conversation lingering in the air. Outside, the rain-soaked streets shimmered under the streetlights, as if mirroring the quiet revelations shared within the room. Donald Trump and Bill Gates, two towering figures of their era, had embarked on a conversation that began as a meeting of power and ended as an exchange of humanity. In the end, they found not resolution, but a shared understanding that greatness isn't measured by wealth or power, but by the lives touched along the way. In the quiet stillness of that room, they left with more questions than answers. But perhaps in the journey of life, that was the point all along. The Washington sky was shifting from deep black to a pale gray, signaling the approach of dawn. Outside, faint streetlights glowed, their reflections shimmering on the misted windows, blending with the soft haze of the early morning. The room, still bathed in the warm light of the chandelier, held a subdued air, quieter now as the hours slipped by. Bill Gates and Donald Trump remained at the long dining table, their wine glasses resting in their hands untouched. It felt as though they were grasping for time itself, unwilling to let this rare and vulnerable conversation come to an end. Trump leaned back in his chair, setting his glass down with deliberate care. His gaze lingered on Bill's face, his tone quieter than usual. Bill, you've done incredible things for the world, but I wonder, do you ever feel like you've sacrificed too much? Do you regret what you've had to give up to get here? Bill paused, his expression thoughtful, as if Trump's question had stirred long-buried memories. He looked down at the glass of water in his hand, his voice lowering. I do, Mr. President. I think anyone who's achieved something significant has paid a price. For me, it was time. When I was young, I gave nearly all of it to Microsoft. I missed so many precious moments with my family, moments I can never get back. And yes, I regret that deeply. Trump nodded slowly, a rare glimmer of understanding in his eyes. I know what you mean. People see me as this fearless man, someone who's always chasing success. But the truth is, I've given up more than most people realize. My family, they probably deserved more from me than I was ever able to give. His words hung in the air, heavy yet honest. In that moment, this was no longer a dialogue between two symbols of power, but an exchange between two human beings, both grappling with the personal costs of their ambitions. Bill placed his hand lightly on the table, his voice steady and reflective. You know, Donald, people look at my success and forget about my failures. I remember once we launched a new product at Microsoft, and it flopped completely. But what I learned is that failure isn't the end. It's just another lesson, a way to do better next time. Trump chuckled, his tone carrying a trace of humor. Well, Bill, if we're comparing failures, I'm probably way ahead. I've gone bankrupt, been mocked by the media, and faced moments when I thought it was all over. But you know what kept me going? Resilience. I refused to let failure be the final word. Bill smiled, his expression one of genuine respect. That resilience of yours, Donald, is something I truly admire. We may not agree on many things, but I can't deny that your sheer determination is what's brought you this far. Unexpectedly, Trump shared a story he rarely told. Bill, did I ever tell you about the boy I met at a hospital? He had cancer, and his dream was to meet me in person. I spent the entire afternoon with him. When he passed away, his parents sent me a letter. They said that moment meant everything to him. It made me think about how the smallest things we do can mean the world to someone else. Bill nodded, his voice resonating with quiet emotion. It's moments like that, Donald, that remind us true strength isn't in power or wealth. It's in how we use them to bring joy and hope to others. Trump leaned back, his expression softening into one of rare contemplation. You're right, but sometimes I still wonder if I've done enough. Whether my decisions really made things better or if they were just short-term fixes. Bill's gaze was firm yet kind. None of us are perfect, and none of us can fix everything. But as long as we keep trying, even if we only change one life, that's still a victory worth striving for. As the conversation wound toward its conclusion, Trump looked directly at Bill, his voice serious and tinged with vulnerability. Bill, what do you think the meaning of life is? I've achieved everything I set out to, but sometimes I still feel empty. Bill hesitated, as if weighing his words carefully, then spoke in a tone both steady and profound. To me, the meaning of life isn't in what we achieve, but in what we leave behind. It's about how we love, how we help others, and how we make the world a little better than we found it. Trump sat quietly for a moment, his head slightly bowed. Then he nodded, his voice softer than before. I think I understand what you mean. Maybe I've been so focused on winning that I forgot. Sometimes, happiness isn't about reaching the finish line. It's about appreciating the journey. As their conversation neared its end, the two men sat in reflective silence, the weight of their words lingering in the air. Outside, the faint light of dawn began to illuminate the city, casting a serene glow over the rain-soaked streets. Donald Trump and Bill Gates, two of the most powerful figures of their era, had shared a night of rare vulnerability, exploring questions of legacy, sacrifice, and meaning. Despite their differences, they had found common ground in their shared humanity, a longing to leave the world a little brighter, a little better. And as the first rays of sunlight touched the horizon, they both understood that this conversation wasn't about answers. It was about the courage to ask the questions that truly mattered. Trump's tone softened as he shifted the conversation. Bill, what does family mean to you? I know you're a father, and I've always wondered, how do you balance your career with your responsibilities at home? Bill let out a quiet sigh, his gaze growing distant. Family, to me, is everything. But I haven't always been the father I wanted to be. There were times when I was so consumed by work that I didn't realize my children were growing up right before my eyes. It wasn't until I stepped away from Microsoft to focus on my foundation that I understood just how precious those moments with family truly are. Trump sat in silence for a moment, his voice carrying a rare tinge of regret when he spoke. I understand that. I've missed so many moments with my kids too. I've always told myself that everything I've done has been for their future. But I can't deny there are times I wish I had been there more. In that instant, the two men seemed to find a profound connection. Stripped of their titles and power, they were just fathers. Two men reflecting on the sacrifices they had made and the irreplaceable moments they had lost. Trump leaned forward slightly, his curiosity evident. Bill, if you could leave one thing behind for the world, just one thing, what would it be? Bill responded without hesitation, as though he had carried the answer his entire life. I would leave behind hope. Hope that humanity can achieve extraordinary things when we come together and believe in what's good and right. I've always believed we're not just here to live. We're here to make the world better. Trump nodded, his voice uncharacteristically soft. That's a beautiful thought. I think if I could leave anything, it would be the lesson that nothing is impossible. If we're determined and strong enough, we can break through any barrier. Outside, the gray hues of night began to shift, welcoming the soft light of the early morning. The room, once cloaked in shadows, seemed to brighten with the gentle arrival of the first rays of sunlight. Bill and Trump remained seated, their conversation now lighter, as though the weight of the night's discussions had lifted. The words they had shared lingered in the air, but the tension between them had melted into something resembling mutual understanding. Trump stood first, walking to the window and gazing out at the sky slowly coming to life. Turning back, his voice carried a note of gratitude. Bill, thank you for tonight. I'm not sure if I've changed your mind about anything, but I know this. I've learned a lot from this conversation. Bill rose as well, his expression warm and sincere. And I from you, Mr. President. We may differ in many ways, but what matters is that we took the time to listen to each other. As they shook hands one last time, the morning sun broke through the windows, flooding the room with light. For a moment, the two men stood illuminated, their differences momentarily eclipsed by a shared truth, a mutual desire to leave the world better than they had found it. The story ended, but what they shared would remain, a part of their journey toward understanding the deeper meaning of life, not just for themselves, but for all who might hear and reflect on their tale. In the soft glow of dawn, it was clear. While their paths were different, their aspirations had more in common than either might have believed. The meeting between Bill Gates and Donald Trump was more than a conversation between two powerful figures. It was a profound lesson in dialogue, listening, and understanding. Bill Gates and Donald Trump came from two vastly different worlds, one a symbol of technological innovation and compassion, the other of power, determination, and ambition. Yet through their conversation, they discovered that their differences didn't divide them. Instead, they enriched their exchange. It's a reminder that diversity in thought and experience often leads to the most meaningful growth. Both men spoke of their monumental achievements, but also the regrets and lessons born from failure. Their words revealed that true success isn't just about what we accomplish, but how we face the challenges along the way. Success isn't measured by trophies or titles. It's found in resilience, reflection, and the courage to keep moving forward. Whether it was Bill's unwavering commitment to philanthropy or Trump's relentless determination to overcome obstacles, they agreed on one thing. The greatest legacy isn't the monuments we build or the wealth we amass. It's the impact we leave in the lives of others, the values we inspire, and the hope we ignite. This story isn't just about Bill Gates and Donald Trump. It's a reflection for all of us. It invites us to pause and ask ourselves, what truly matters in my life? Is it my career, my family, or the way I influence the world around me? If I could leave behind one legacy, what would it be? How do I handle differences with others? Do I seek common ground, or let those differences create distance? Has this story made you reflect on your own journey? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your perspective, lessons, or personal experiences in the comments. Your words might inspire someone else, just as Bill and Trump's conversation has inspired us. If this story resonated with you, consider taking these small steps to spread its message. 1. Hit like. A simple like not only shows your support, but also motivates us to continue bringing meaningful stories to you. 2. Subscribe. Stay connected with us and ensure you don't miss future stories. We're committed to creating content that inspires, uplifts, and helps you find value in life. 3. Share. Pass this story on to a friend, a family member, or a colleague. You never know. It might be just what they need to hear today. Each of us is on a unique journey filled with twists, turns, and lessons. Through this story, we hope you found the inspiration to keep striving, keep learning, and keep loving. Remember, no matter who you are, you have the power to make a difference. Even the smallest actions you take today can create a better world for tomorrow. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. May you carry hope, compassion, and a deep desire to live a meaningful life. We'll see you again in the next story. Until then, keep believing in your power to leave the world better than you found it.